Inter Miami is in the win column in 2021, but only after a dramatic and thrilling comeback victory. Hello everybody and welcome to the latest episode of Miami Total Football Radio, aka Miami Total Football Radio. I am your co-host Franco Panizo on this week's podcast, and joining me as always is none other than El Primo, Steve Brenner. Steve, how are you doing? Had a couple of days to reflect on Inter Miami's win. So, what'd you think of the game really quickly? We're going to dive into it in depth a little bit later. But what'd you think really quickly, and how are you doing?
Yeah, great, thank you. Good to be back. It's good to be on as always. Look, brilliant last 20 minutes. I think I even texted you at one point saying this is hopeless, they're terrible, they're not going to do anything, this is rubbish. And all of a sudden it just just turns around just a little bit. Got the goal, got the second goal. Did they deserve it on the balance of play? You could argue either way, but they hung in, they got the win, and that's it. Just releases a bit of pressure and just helps them now go into the rest of the season, with that win, and then hopefully there's something to build on.
It is something for them to build on. I agree with you that they didn't have the greatest game, but they pulled it out in the end. We'll touch on that, and we'll touch on the upcoming game against Nashville SC this weekend, as well as all the other recent news surrounding the team. But of course, we have to touch on and start the pod with a bit of sad and heartbreaking news. It was being reported today in Argentina, today Monday, that Gonzalo Federico Higuain's mother, Nancy, has passed away after a years-long battle with cancer. And that's obviously heartbreaking news. You never want to lose anybody, especially not a mother. So heartfelt condolences to the Iguan family. Not the news you want to start the week with.
No, yeah, very, very sad, and our thoughts and wishes go to his family. And we saw after the game, didn't they? They both, Federico spoke about his mother and how they wanted to dedicate it to her and stuff like that. So yeah, really, really sad news.
It is sad news. We'll see how it impacts the Higuains and Inter Miami going forward, because that's obviously something that might have to be taken into consideration. Whether they travel outside of the country to go be with the family. We'll see how that all unfolds. It's all very fresh right now, so we don't have a lot of information. But we'll get to that later on in the week and bring you that news as things unfold. Steve, we have a lot to talk about with regards to this game, a lot to analyze. So let's get to it. So Inter Miami picked up its first victory of the season. It was a 2-1 road win over the Philadelphia Union, the reigning Supporters' Shield holders. And it took, like Steve mentioned earlier, a very dramatic comeback in the final 20 minutes or so of the match. Inter Miami goes with the same starting lineup as in the season opener. John McCarthy in goal, Kelvin Leardam at right back, Nicolas Figal at right center back, Leandro Gonzalez Pires at left center back. He takes the captain's armband from Gonzalo Iguain because they're rotating that this season. Jovan Jones at left back, Gregori at the defensive midfield spot, Blaise Matuidi next to him but a little bit more advanced in the central midfield, Lewis Morgan on the right wing, Rodolfo Pizarro at the 10, Robbie Robinson on the left flank, and Gonzalo Iguain up top. Inter Miami goes down to the Philadelphia Union at Subaru Park in the 54th minute. Jamido Monteiro with the goal, and it looked pretty bleak shortly after that. Inter Miami just couldn't get going, couldn't find a way to break through the Philadelphia Union's press, but a stroke of genius from Phil Neville in terms of pulling Rodolfo Pizarro in the 61st minute and inserting Federico Higuain changed the game. It tilted the game in Inter Miami's favor, and you saw them score 2 goals in the final 17 minutes. First, Gonzalo Iguain in the 73rd off of a free kick from his brother Federico. Nice headed finish to the inside right post. And then Federico Higuain came up with the game winner in the 83rd minute. 10 minutes later, he scores the winner off of a header himself, taking maybe a page out of his brother's book there. A clinical header off of an excellent cross from Nicolas Figal. Inter Miami holds on and picks up a 2-1 victory. Steve, you gave us your quick thoughts. Now give us your expanded thoughts. What do you think of the game and the ability for Inter Miami to pull out this victory?
Yeah, well, I guess they would have after the match. I think they would have been happy because they were up against it. They were really created very very little up until the two goals. They defensively they looked kind of okay, but they were up against it. I think once Philadelphia took the lead, it was you felt like they were going to concede at any point really, and they were really up against it. But I think that was the key moment, wasn't it? Pizarro again. I'm sure we'll touch on him in a bit, but it just wasn't really working for him. I know you kept pointing out that Higuain kept dropping too far back, and then once he dropped too far back, they had absolutely nothing going forward. I think he was getting frustrated. There was no service. That's where Pizarro should be coming in. He should be feeding Higuain. They should be playing in tandem. If he's going to play, if they are going to pivot like a three, then they need to feed off each other. And Iguan was getting nothing, and that's why he was coming back. But I think when Federico Higuain came on, he just got the ball, he kept giving it, he just was linking midfield and attack. He was in the box, he scored the goal, he assisted for the first goal. He was just doing more. It's not, he just needed. There's like a missing link between the sort of midfield and attack, and that's where Pizarro. That's his role. And I think he slows the play down too much. He just doesn't. They're not passing. They're not transitioning quickly enough, and when he gets the ball, he just slows everything down. And I think that was frustrating Gonzalo Iguain, and it just wasn't working. And I think that change helped because then Federico came on. He gave the ball, to picking it up, moving it on. He was neat and tidy, and then he was effective in the box. I think that's what they've missed.
This show for you, this pod has become a piñata. A birthday piñata, and you are the birthday boy because every week you come on here and just hammer away at Rodolfo Pizarro nonstop. Listen,
if he would have scored a hat trick, it'd been absolutely sensational.
You still would hammer him. You would still hammer him for not scoring 4.
No, not at all. Look, the pressure's on. He's a big money signing. He didn't really do much last season, and he started off, and he just hasn't produced it either. And I think it's frustrating. For the coaching staff because they know that there's a good player in there. He's not assertive enough. So there's got to be questions over his future.
I will jump into that a little more in detail. I want to start with the positives and let's start with the defensive performance. A much noted upgrade from what they looked like in the second half of the season opener. Defensively sound, more in line with what we saw in the first half against the LA Galaxy. They did give up a goal 9 minutes after halftime. Bit of a sloppy play there. I put some of the blame, if not most of the blame, on Kelvin Leerdam, but it was a team breakdown. It wasn't just on any one person. But defensively, they were very good on the balance of things over the course of the 90 minutes. And I thought a big part of that was Nicolas Figal and Leandro Gonzalez Pires, the center back tandem, raising their levels to what should be expected of them. I thought Nicolas Figal had an immense game. He's kind of flown under the radar here because of the storyline with the Iguan brothers scoring, making history as the first brothers in Major League Soccer to score in the same game. But Nicolas Figal was immense. I would give the man of the match to Federico Higuain because he changed the complexion of the game, and I gave him a 9 in my player ratings on SBIsoccer.com in the player ratings piece and the analysis piece that I do after every game. But I also gave Nicolas Figal a 9 as well. Tremendous performance from him. He sets up the winner as well with that exquisite cross from the right once he got moved over to the right back position. And he almost set up an insurance goal after that with a right-footed cross to Gonzalo Iguain that Andre Blake made a fantastic save on. Great performance from him on both sides of the ball. Great performance from Leandro Gonzalez Pires, who I gave an 8 to. He was a rock defensively. Solid performance from Inter Miami on the defensive side. Philadelphia Union also did not do a whole lot in the attack over the course of the 90 minutes. They had a couple of looks. John McCarthy came up with one big save, but on the balance of things, John McCarthy was fairly inactive. He didn't have to do a whole lot in this one. But let's go and move to Iguain, Federico Iguain, because I agree with you that he came in and moved the ball faster. And when I went back and watched the game, I always watch the games a second time. I'm always up till 3, 4 in the morning on game nights because I rewatch the games and I stop, press play, pause, rewind, fast forward. Actually, no, fast forward. That's a lie. So what I saw in the second viewing of the match was that with Federico Iguain in the game, he moved the ball so much quicker. A lot of one-time passes, a lot of one or two-touch passing. Didn't sit on the ball, wasn't overly deliberate in terms of his passing. Just was simple and quick with his decisions, and it helped Inter Miami tremendously. It opened the game up for them, and obviously they get back into the game because of a set piece, an area they had struggled in last year, so that's notable as well. But for me, Federico Higuain changed the course of the game, and I don't think he's a starter. I don't think, he's going to be a guy that you can count on for 90 minutes week in and week out, because at 36, I just don't think he has that much left in the tank to be able to give you that. But I think it's a good piece to have on the bench to dispel Pizarro, to maybe start in a game here or there over the course of the year. I'm not sure what you think. Maybe you think he could be a starter on a more permanent basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing is he's got experience of playing in the league, which is something that unfortunately Pizarro doesn't have. And even Gonzalo Iguain said last week that he found adjusting to playing in MLS was difficult for physical reasons, and just the style of play, the tempo, etc., etc. So, I mean, I'd start him really. I'd start Federico against Nashville for sure.
So you would sit Pizarro. You'd sit your DP. I forget how many millions he got paid, but the X $1 million man, you would sit him.
100%, yeah. On the basis of what we saw on the back end of Saturday night, yeah, why not?
It's MLS, man. You gotta, DP's getting benched. I mean, it's not like it's completely uncommon. Is the manager Don Garber or Phil Neville? I'm not sure. I mean, sure, but the manager's job is also to get the most out of his players, and to give up on Rodolfo Pizarro after 2 games into the season would be.
It's not giving up.
If you're benching him after 2 games, that's a pretty big sign. That's a pretty big sign that you don't.
From what I understand, I don't think he hasn't particularly impressed in these opening games anyway. They think he's a little bit too slow. In terms of possession-wise. So, there's definitely question marks over him, put it that way. They're not really unsure how to use him properly, and he hasn't delivered. They've given him a couple of games, hasn't done anything. So changes, see what happens, see if you get a reaction. Not going to just
go ahead.
Cast him out. Not going to say just hang him out to dry and he'll never play again. But, maybe just give him a little nudge to say, hold on, you need to up your game. But I don't think we really saw anything from him last season anyway. So I don't even know what I'm actually basing the fact on that he can actually do it in this league anyway. I'm really not sure what he is, because he hasn't really shown anything.
I think when you just said a little bit ago that he hasn't shown anything in these first 2 games, well, that's not true, because he helped set up the opener in the season opener with a great through ball to Gonzalo Iguain who then fed Robbie Robinson. So to say he has done nothing over these 2 games is not accurate in my opinion.
I take that back, Rodolfo. I didn't mean that. All I meant was, I just think and let's be right, for 70 minutes on Saturday night, Gonzalo Iguain wasn't particularly amazing, was he? Yeah. But he's just there. He's just there. He's just a presence. He's snarling and he's just getting in amongst their faces. I don't know how Pizarro is contributing other than just sort of knocking it square and then just slowing everything down. I don't know what else he's doing right now. That's not to say that he can't improve moving forward, but I think when it comes to sort of if there's going to be one player potentially that they're going to try and move on, I think Pizarro's name will be sort of beginning to get circulated, agents and different things to see what they can do. But I know it's a complex thing of trying to get rid of someone that's on a DP contract, which is a different conversation. But I'm sure that talks will be ongoing in the next few weeks and how they can do to solve the problem.
Listen, I wouldn't be surprised if he were moved on. If I saw that news tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised if they're, I know transfer windows aren't open right now across the world, but if I saw the headline tomorrow, Rodolfo Pizarro sold to so-and-so, that would not surprise me, because he is a player that was brought on by the previous leadership and was someone that had a very close relationship with Diego Alonso, the former head coach. Diego Alonso at one point last year in Spanish even said, I have a very paternal relationship with Pizarro. He had coached him at 2 clubs before Inter Miami. That was clearly his guy. He asked for Pizarro to be signed, and that they ended up making that deal happen. So clearly, he was part of the previous leadership's vision for what the team is supposed to be. Team, as we know, has new leadership. Pizarro might not fit that bigger picture in the long term. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up moving on in the summer, at the end of the season. I wouldn't be surprised. But obviously it's a matter of finding someone who's willing to pay a transfer fee for him and figuring out those details, which are not always the easiest thing. So I agree that he needs to raise the level of his performance and do more.
Just wanting to make a difference.
But he's not a 10. But he's not a 10. He's not a 10. And I don't want to harp on that again because we touched on that last week. We touched on that in other weeks. He's not a 10. Let's see this team play that 4. We've talked about this. I've told you. He's an 8. He's an 8 that's being played as a 10. He's a central midfielder that can move the ball, box to box, facilitator. He's not a creator. He's just not a creator. And he's not going to be that for you 9 out of 10 times. 9 out of 10 times, it's just not who he is. It's like putting Ryan Shawcross on the wing and asking Shawcross to beat people with his speed. He's just not that player. So I don't.
That'd be a good
idea. Oh man, look, I think when it comes to Pizarro, he needs to do more. But I also want to see them play the 4-3-3 that we saw at times during the final preseason scrimmage that I asked Phil Neville about. Phil Neville talked about that and said, we like that look at times because it allows him to get more touches on the ball. And that's something else Phil Neville said during preseason. We want to get Pizarro more touches so he can influence the game more because he's one of our more technical and better players. So let's see that. Having him play up high limits him. And, I don't think it best suits him. So that's just my 2 cents on the matter. We'll see how things unravel or unfold with regards to Pizarro and his performances and his positioning with Inter Miami going forward. I do want to talk about something else you mentioned, and that is Gonzalo Iguain's performance in this one. He scored, and he got a sweet, sweet, sweet taste of redemption because, obviously, like we know, he made his debut in Philadelphia at Subaru Park against the Union last year in September, missed a penalty kick in that match. Philadelphia Union players celebrated the miss very euphorically around him. That led to a little shoving and shouting between him and a few other players. But he scored in this one. He got the header, the equalizer, helps bring Inter Miami back into the match. He does the shh sound with his finger, his index finger over his mouth. Sweet bit of revenge for him with that goal. He has 2 goals in 2 games and an assist. So statistically speaking, he's had an impact on both games, which is what you want out of your designated player. However, on the balance of play, I agree he has not looked particularly great, especially in this one. I thought the first 70 minutes were very poor from him. Just a lot of dropping deep into ineffective positions, not being the dangerous type of striker that we know he can be, not getting into the box that often, and just rendering himself largely useless in the attack. A lot of, obviously, like we've seen, a lot of frustration, visible frustration with his arms wailing about. Not a good first 70 minutes from him. He changed after Federico Higuain came in, though.
Yeah, it was a difficult sort of 70 minutes just because the team weren't, playing very well. There wasn't any particularly good service for him. I think, the midfield were holding things up and just they were on the back foot for a lot of it. If you remember, the Union were, obviously got a good home record from last season and just they just Inter Miami couldn't create anything. There was nothing, wasn't there? There was absolutely nothing until they scored. So it's something.
Well, there was something. There was the Robbie Robinson shot that hit off the crossbar that he earned it for himself by intercepting a pass or picking off a pass high up the field. But
they were grimly hanging on rather than actually sort of bossing it and thinking, we're in it. And it obviously took a set piece to unlock it. But sometimes you just need just that little bit of luck, just something to go your way. But I think. Yeah, on the balance of play, I don't think they would have come in and said, "Oh, we absolutely deserve to win that." They stole it at the end, but that's the way that cookie crumbles sometimes.
Sure, no, they absolutely on the balance of play probably did not deserve to win this one, just like they probably did not deserve to lose the season opener. But that's the beauty of the beautiful game, right? So. Again,
and you've noticed world-class Chicharito now has 5 goals after his amazing hat-trick at the weekend. There was you scoffing, saying he wasn't a world-class player.
He's not a world-class player. He scored
5 goals in 2 games.
Okay, he scored. Have you seen some of the goals he scored? Did you see one of the goals he scored? There was a deflection,
that deflection was brilliant. The way that he deflected off that guy. Amazing.
And the one that deflected into his path. And I mean, look, credit to him, kudos to him. He has a nose for a goal, like they say in Spanish, un olfato de gol. And that's, what's made his bread and butter. Like the goal he scored this weekend against the Red Bulls, where the ball was essentially deflecting out of bounds, but he never gave up on it and ran and chased it down and scores off of a sliding effort from a tight angle, nearly practically on the end line. Incredible effort, incredible goal in terms of how he stayed determined and dedicated to that. I would like to see Gonzalo Iguain do some more of that. Now, obviously, Gonzalo Iguain is a different player, has different physical strengths and limitations, but I would like to see that hunger in the box, because I want to dissect and dive into him dropping deep, because that was my lead point in my analysis piece for SBIsoccer.com. And I don't necessarily just blame Rodolfo Pizarro and all that. I think Gonzalo Iguain just drops back deep because he doesn't really trust his teammates. He doesn't trust them to get him the ball in dangerous spots, so he drops to get involved in the build-up to try to make things happen and create stuff from there. I've seen other strikers do this. I've seen Thierry Henry do this. I've seen David Villa do this. Big name strikers that have played at the highest levels in Europe and internationally that come to MLS. They're used to a certain level of quality from their teammates. They don't necessarily get that here, so they drop deep to try to get more involved, get more touches on the ball. I understand why he might do that, but it doesn't help Inter Miami by and large, because if you go to that piece on SBIsoccer.com or just on my Twitter handle or on Miami Total Football's Instagram page, you'll see the images of him. There's multiple that I've taken from the game, stills, where he's in very deep positions. And there's not just one person in front of him, not one Inter Miami player in front of him, but like 2, 3, 4 players in front of him. And that's not what you want from your striker, because he's not a false nine. He's not that type of player. He's not your number 10. He's your goal-scoring striker. You're paying him $8 million reportedly a year to put the ball into the back of the net like he did with that header. His poaching, his finishing is his bread and butter. He needs to get into the box. And Phil Neville has said that, which makes it even all the more mind-boggling that we're still seeing this constant habit, this constant penchant of dropping deep. Because when he's in the box, that's where he's at his most lethal. And Phil Neville has said he wants him in the box more often. But yet we're not seeing him there often. And the worst part is that when he drops deep, he then doesn't really make that much of an effort to run in. And it's like he doesn't have the belief that his teammates are going to get him the ball. Or, I mean, again, that's just from my vantage point on the outside. I don't know what you might attribute it to, but to me, that's something that has to be corrected going forward. Because if Inter Miami is going to avoid needing to pull games out of, or pulling rabbits out of hats late, they need to get more from him from the run of play. He hasn't scored. That's another note. Another interesting and I think not coincidental note. He has not scored yet from the run of play in 11 MLS matches dating back to last year. He scored off a free kick, a penalty kick, and now off of a header that came off a free kick from his brother.
Yeah, I mean, I think he just gets frustrated. He doesn't get any service, and he's the best player on the team. And I think, you know, if you're the best player, you want the ball, you want to get involved. You know, you can make a difference. If the ball's not coming to you, you're going to have to drop deep to get it. So maybe he's going against coach's wishes or whatever. We don't know, but I think it just smacks of frustration of the team not being able to create enough chances. If they were kept slipping him through and he was on to goal, you know, every 10 minutes, then that would have been great. But he was starved of service. He barely was touching the ball, and I think that just that paints to a more sort of endemic problem with the team in terms of how they can actually try and get the ball in the box. Because if you get the ball in the box to him, I think 9 times out of 10 he's probably going to score. But it's just getting the ball to him in the first place, which is the problem.
Sure, but he also has to stay there so that his teammates have the reference point up top, the spearhead of the attack, that they know he's there to feed him that ball instinctually. Not necessarily they have to look for him every single time. They just have to know that he's there to whip it across or play a pass and hope that he's, you know, able to resolve and finish them off. Because if they don't have that belief, if they don't have that intuition or that sixth sense to just say, he'll finish it, he's in there, they're going to be reluctant to pull the trigger. It's like a, you know, chicken or egg dilemma for me, because if he's always dropping back, are they going to trust to feed him in the box? Are they going to trust that he's in there to finish things off? Just as, you know, he also has to try to get his touches on the ball. I get why he might do it, but I don't know if Phil Neville has to drill it into him or or what, but he needs to stay in that box because you could see it on a few plays. You know, there's the one play where Robbie Robinson dribbled near the end line, and he should have released it to Higuain sooner or Pizarro sooner because they were both there crashing the box. But you have to be there. You have to make those runs. And it's thankless at times, the striker position, because you might not get the ball, but you have to make those runs. And that's another thing that I'll note really quickly. With him always dropping deep, and I know at this point in his career at 33, he's not the fastest guy. He probably was never the fastest guy. But he needs to help stretch that back line and find those spaces in behind. Because sure, Rodolfo Pizarro might not be playing through balls left and right because he's not a traditional number 10. But at the same time, it's so much easier to defend when everything's in front of you. If you're a team and you're a defense and everything's in front of you, you never have to worry about a through ball coming in behind because that forward's not making the runs. Well, then that makes your defensive job so much easier. So for me, he needs to find ways to be more selfless and, you know, put the team first a little bit more, sacrificing his energy, his fitness, whatever, staying in the box, making runs in behind, diagonal runs in behind to try to help open things up, because what he's doing right now for me is not working for Inter Miami.
No, you're right. They need to sort it out, but I just his sort of lack of influence probably isn't as worrying as Pizarro. But let's leave Pizarro alone now.
You're done battering him this weekend? Okay.
Or
this week.
You can see with Higuain that he's clearly, you know, a great player and can definitely affect the game, you know, at this level for sure. It's just the team just have to kind of be more cohesive as a unit and get him, you know, chances, which is what they're trying to do. But as of yet, in the first couple of games, we've not seen it yet. So let's see what happens next week or this weekend.
Okay, Steve. Well, quickly, anybody else impress you in this game? Anyone stand out besides some of the players we've already mentioned?
I thought Matuidi was pretty solid. Gregorio was pretty solid. I thought Robbie Robinson sort of, you know, ran hard, and actually that was a shame, wasn't it, when he got injured, because I actually thought that he'd done pretty well up until that point. A couple of question marks maybe against the fullbacks again. Maybe did okay, but not amazing. But like you say, I think Figal and Gonzalo Perez were definitely, you know, star men in terms of just keeping everything solid. I thought McCarthy was pretty solid as well. And then obviously when Figal actually impressed a lot when he moved to right back, and then Shawcross came in and sort of steadied things up. And then obviously it was his cross for the winner. So I think there was just sort of solid performance, wasn't it? No one particularly outstanding other than Federico Higuain, but just solid. What about you?
So I've already said I thought Federico Higuain, Nicolas Figal were both a cut above everybody else. Thought Leandro Gonzalez-Pires was right behind them. In terms of anybody else that impressed me, I thought Matuidi had a good game before he was subbed out due to fatigue probably. I also thought Victor Ulloa off the bench was pretty good in terms of doing what he needed to do. He didn't play that much, but he helped break things up when he was on the field. And he also played that very good through ball in behind the defense that almost led to the insurance goal from Gonzalo Iguain. So I liked what I saw from Ulloa off the bench, who, notably or not, is the fourth captain that Phil Neville has named this year. Now, one final thing I want to touch on in this game that I think deserves some discussion. I wish I could have fit it into my post-game piece for SBI Soccer because I think it was worthy of a shout, but I always leave it to just 3 thoughts and player ratings. Phil Neville learning from his week 1 mistakes and making quicker subs and more impactful subs. That helped change the game. That was key. That was what helped turn things around. We obviously give props and credit to Federico Higuain for turning the match around, but I thought Phil Neville's decision-making here in terms of managing the match, especially in that second half, I thought that was a big difference for Inter Miami.
Yeah, that's what you want to do. You know, especially in a squad where they don't have a lot of options. You know, it's not like Man City or Chelsea or Barcelona where they can just throw on a $300 million player and say, right, okay, you go and do it now. He hasn't been doing it. They are, you know, they're outside of the top main, you know, first 11. There's not too much to choose from. So it would have really pleased him to have made that change and for it to have come good. You know, like I say, he doesn't have a lot of options off the bench. So if it was a like for like, I guess probably Federico Higuain was probably the like for like for Pizarro, if you like, and it worked. It doesn't always work, as you know, but this time it did.
You know what was notable to me about it all is that during the post-game press conference, someone, I forget who it was, but someone asked him about subbing in Shawcross and Ulloa late in the game, and what looked to be him closing up shop to try to leave it at 1-1 and get out of Philadelphia with a point. And in his response, I thought it was notable that Phil Neville said, "I made subs earlier this week or this time." Like almost as if he knew that criticism of him existed, or he was aware that maybe he held on to his substitutions too long in week 1. That's just how I perceived it. If that's the case, kudos to him for recognizing the errors he had and correcting them, because again, that was as key as anything to Inter Miami's comeback win in this one. But let's leave it there, Steve. Let's take a quick break. We still have to talk about the upcoming game against Nashville SC, so we'll touch on that after this.
I think, speaking from real experience, having played with a brother for a long time, there is a special bond when you're in the same team. Even though Federico and Gonzalo obviously are just teammates, there is a love, there's a bond, there's an understanding. Because I had the same feeling. With my brother, so it's a special moment for them both.
All right, Primo, we're going to jump into the Nashville SC game this weekend, but before we do that, we have to touch on the non-update on Blaise Matuidi. Don Garber said in the season opener at halftime, we were both there for the scrum, that there would be an update on the Matuidi investigation, aka what I dub Matuidi Gate, at the end of this week. And by this week, he meant last week. But we didn't get an update. What did you think about that? Were you surprised that we didn't get an update, or standard procedure for MLS?
Well, our friends at MLS, and one friend in particular that we both know, he said to us, didn't he, that he'd been fielding a lot of calls and that these investigations take a long time. So the timeline of Don Garber saying, yes, we'll know this week, you kind of took it with a bit of a pinch of salt. It's just kind of rumbling on, isn't it? It must be a very, very thorough investigation. I'm sure they're in Blaise Matuidi's house now, looking under his pillows or in his drawer or in his cupboard, seeing what's there. I just, if anything, just be serious one moment. It's maybe it is a very complicated way of they're obviously trying to trace the money trail of everything that's sort of gone down in terms of what Matuidi was given and what's gone through the books and what hasn't gone through the books, and it's clearly stuff that he's been given away from the books or something that's not been recorded properly that they're trying to nail down exactly. But we were led to believe all that was done. So why it's taken another 2 weeks to decide what punishment they're going to get. Maybe there was more to be done. We're not sure. We don't know anything, do we? That's the thing. We're purely speculating because the details of this investigation has been pretty scant.
I said this to a friend the other day on WhatsApp. We on the reporting side, and I'm not just saying you and I, but all of us on the media side, not just locally, nationally, we've done a terrible job in this story or on this story, because we have gotten very little reported out there for listeners, for soccer fans. We just haven't gotten much. So MLS has done a good job of keeping it close to the vest, and us on the reporting side have not done a good job. We're going to keep trying to dig and see what we can find or what we can hear to give you all. But MLS has been airtight on this one. So far we don't have much else to add. Now let's switch over to this weekend's game against Nashville SC. They play on Sunday afternoon against Inter Miami, and the game is at Nissan Stadium. Steve, Nashville was defensively sound last year, and they earned a lot of plaudits for that, a lot of praise for how good they were defensively as an expansion team. A lot of the same team is back. However, they have started the season, somewhat surprisingly, with a pair of draws, a pair of 2-2 draws. The first one against FC Cincinnati, which just got throttled this weekend by New York City FC by a 5-0 mark. And then Nashville tied at home against Montreal CF 2-2 again. And in this one, Nashville had to come from behind to get a result. So they were down 2-0 in this game. Both of their matches so far have been at home. This next one against Inter Miami for them is at home. What do you think of the match? What do you expect from Nashville SC?
Yeah, I mean, look, they were impressive, weren't they? In that playoff game, Dax McCarty was running things in the middle, and they just seemed a better cohesive unit than Inter Miami did at that point, where they were pretty shambolic. Just to get into the playoffs was a result, really, wasn't it? So, yeah, I think they'll draw a lot. It's pretty much the same team, bar a few players that's going to be playing. But I think maybe they're into this game in a different mindset. They were never really in the playoff game, were they? I think they got comprehensively sort of beaten. But maybe they can take a little bit of solace from the fact that Nashville haven't really started. It with two goals down against Montreal the weekend, and then managed to get back. So maybe they're defensively they're suffering from a bit of second season syndrome. So we'll have to wait and see.
They also have Dylan Nealis on their roster, the former Inter Miami player that was traded a few weeks ago. I think for Inter Miami, with the defensive frailties that we've seen through Nashville or in Nashville through these first two games, I think Inter Miami could exploit that. I think Inter Miami could have more of the ball, maybe even win the possession battle. In this one, they haven't won a possession battle through these first two games of the 2021 regular season. So I think we could see Miami have more of a chance to dictate the tempo and be the protagonists. We'll see what they do because, look, again, we don't have any information as of today, Monday, because everything's so fresh and new. But I would imagine there's a possibility that Gonzalo Iguain and Federico Higuain are not available for the game because maybe they travel to Argentina to be with their family. I would imagine it's a possibility. Again, that's not information. That's just what I'm just thinking here as the news has just unfolded over the last few hours about their mother's passing. If they're not available, those are, especially in terms of Gonzalo, that's obviously a big loss from the starting lineup. So we'll see who steps up if they're not available. But what are the keys to the game for you? Let's assume that Gonzalo and Federico Higuain are available. What are the keys to the game for you for Inter Miami?
As we've mentioned before, I think getting the ball to Gonzalo Iguain when he's actually in the box or in the final third, you don't want him dropping back. I think that's the whole point of having Grigore and Matuidi in midfield and Lewis Morgan. They've got to do the hard yards with Morgan, maybe just a bit of creativity in there alongside our friend Pizarro if he plays. So I just think they need to create more chances. I think when push comes to shove, I think defensively they can just about sort of hold their own. I think they can keep repelling attacks and be as solid as they want. I just think that the problems just tend to mount when they're just trying to score goals. But then we saw in the opening game they looked really good in attack, were flying forward the whole time, but yet they looked susceptible at the back. So it's striking a balance. And it sounds simple, and that's what soccer is, isn't it? You've got to keep the ball out and score a goal, but it can be difficult if you haven't got the right pieces to fit the jigsaw, and maybe there's just one or two players that just aren't really fitting into that system maybe right now, and unfortunately through no fault of their own, and it's a terrible tragedy. If they're going to be missing those two guys, and it puts extra places on the squad. But as I said, it's there are more important things in life than playing Nashville away. So our thoughts go out to them, but it's going to cause them a few problems as well.
For me, the keys to the game is the width for Inter Miami. That's the key for me in this one. How much can they get from the wide players? Not only the fullbacks, who they've done okay defensively over these first two games, but they haven't given a whole lot to the attack, in my opinion. And that's probably due to their fitness levels and not being at peak fitness because they arrived to preseason camp late. They were signings that happened during preseason, and then they came in after partaking in international duty. They're still working their way up to full fitness. Not only from them, though. From Lewis Morgan on the right, who has uncharacteristically been very quiet on the whole of these last two games, and whoever plays on the left side. Because, like you mentioned earlier, Robbie Robinson came out of this last game with an apparent hamstring injury. Phil Neville said after the win against Philadelphia that they took him off for precautionary reasons. Again, it's Monday. We haven't had any availability with the team. We haven't heard anything from our sources yet. But I would imagine that Robbie Robinson does not play this weekend. non-contact hamstring injuries tend to be something that take a bit of time to recover from. I think it's hard to envision, at least for me, I think it's just hard to see Robbie Robinson starting this weekend after seeing how he went down. And if you didn't see the play or you didn't have a close eye on it, he pulls up while trying to make a long dribble down the left right before halftime, and he just feels something right before he passes the ball, and then he kind of just clutches to his leg and goes down to the ground as the halftime whistle blows. And then he was subbed off at halftime, obviously. So I don't think he'll play. So whoever goes there at left mid and Lewis Morgan plus the fullbacks, that width is going to be important. They have to produce something to get Higuain the ball and to help create some stuff for Inter Miami in the final third.
Yeah, and it's also, with the fitness thing as well, that it's an ongoing situation, isn't it? So now they've got 2 games under their wing, so to speak. So hopefully they're a bit more in their legs. That's what he wants to play, that sort of pressing game, push wide. You keep the pressure on in that final third. Work hard to try and get the ball back when they're out of possession. And it takes energy. It takes a lot of energy to do that, to be on it for the complete 90 minutes. So with those sort of changes coming in, it's going to be difficult if players aren't up to speed. But I think with now 3 weeks in, hopefully that fitness is beginning to sort of kick in, and maybe also the humidity will be slightly different in Nashville, I guess, as opposed to being here. Although I'm sure it wasn't very humid in Philadelphia on Saturday night.
So that fitness topic is something that we should provide an update on for those that may not be aware. Phil Neville, I asked him last week about how long he thinks it'll take for the team to get the full fitness, and he said they would probably take them another 3 or 4, maybe even 5. He said so. It was definitely 3 or 4 or maybe 5 games. So that's like another 3-4 weeks, which is what I thought would be the case last week when we were just going off of what we thought or how long we thought it would take. But in this game against Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is a more direct team, so that also helped Inter Miami in terms of possession. But in this game against Philadelphia, you saw Inter Miami press more. And that's one thing that we didn't talk about when we mentioned Pizarro that I think deserves to be said. He presses a lot. And he expends a lot of energy on the defensive side pressing in deep positions. Because Gonzalo Iguain, we know his physical limitations, especially at 33. He doesn't press all that much. He doesn't have the legs to do that. So Pizarro, when they're in a defensive posture, practically stands up there almost like in a 4-4-2, your beloved 4-4-2. And he does a lot of the pressing to help not make the opposing teams build out so comfortable. So he expends a lot of energy on the defensive side. So that makes it even more important for me, again, for the width, the wingers, Kelvin Leerdam, Jovan Jones, Lewis Morgan, and potential mystery player on the left to create things. Because Inter Miami might be a little more fit. They might be able to press a little bit more, but they're going to need to get more from their wings. Quickly, Steve, to wrap up this segment, give me any changes you see in the lineup that you think, and your prediction.
Well, it's going to be enforced, isn't it? So you would say definitely that Robinson. I guess maybe would a lower come in for him potentially, or Carranza, one of those two. He's going to have a reshuffle, isn't he? And sort of maybe he won't play as wide, and maybe condense it more in the middle. It's difficult, like I say, we're going over old ground, but when he hasn't got too many options. So it's just a wait and see. I bet he'll be praying that Robbie Robinson is going to be fit. But sometimes when they players pick up injuries and there's sort of no one around them, there's always a sort of surefire sign that it's not great. So, but I think they will go there and with renewed sort of hope after Saturday. But I think, and they mentioned if they're potentially going to be losing both Higuains as well, it's going to be really difficult. So I think if you said now, would you take a draw? They'd probably take it.
So I'm gonna answer the question I just gave you a little more directly because you didn't give me a lineup, but it's okay. It's okay. I will say McCarthy, Leerdam, Figal, Gonzalez Pires, Jones, Gregory Matuidi, Morgan, Pizarro. The left mid spot will be between, if Robbie Robinson can't go, Breck Shea, Josh Penn, maybe Ederson Ascona, although I doubt it. Jay Chapman was the one that came into the weekend at that spot, so I guess he's an option there as well. I'll predict that it'll be Josh Penn. That's my prediction. He didn't dress on the weekend, but he played in the first game. I would predict it's Josh Penn on the left, or Lewis Morgan on the left and Josh Penn on the right. However you wanna look at it that way, and Gonzalo Iguain up front. I could see if the Higuains are available for this game. I could see maybe Federico getting a start at the 10 and Rodolfo being moved out to the left. I could see that, but that's if the Higuains.
It's going to be unlikely they're going to play us now, I think, unfortunately. It's one of those things.
The more I think about it, the more I would, and again, this is just Monday. Things can change between now and the game, or news might come out between now and game. I would imagine that it does come out, or news comes out before the game. We'll have availability at some point this week to ask questions as well. So, but the more I think about it today, sitting here on Monday, I think that they will not be available. And if they're not available, then Julian Carranza for me starts up top, and you keep Pizarro at the 10, and again Josh Penn on the left or right, and Lewis Morgan on the other flank. My prediction's a 1-0 win. Inter Miami picks up another road victory. It won't be easy. It might be ugly, but I think they'll get a win this weekend. Let's take another quick break, Steve. We'll come back for our Q&A session and our final thoughts after this. Okay, Steve, Q&A time. We've got a few, so let's try to run through them as quickly as possible. First one comes from Gabe P. What's your opinion on the 2 games of Robbie? I think he is playing so good. Figal is playing so good. I think he will be the best defender of the Eastern Conference. Steve, what's your opinion on Robbie Robinson through these first 2 matches?
Definitely impressed. He was. I kept saying ad nauseum to people that watching him coming in last season at the start, just come from Clemson, was such a massive step up. For anyone to go up from college train to MLS, but maybe a year under his belt, training. He's been training with the team, fitter, stronger, all that stuff. And yeah, he's definitely impressed. And then Phil Neville actually name checked him pretty early on, didn't he? When we first spoke to him, that he was one of the players that impressed him. And I think he's doing great, and that's why it was just a shame that he picked up the injury when he did. So let's hope it's not too serious, and he can get back sooner rather than later.
I don't share on this one the optimism. I think he's had a decent showing through these first 2 games. I think, again, this is a position he's growing into. He's learning, so I think he will get better with a more understanding of the position and what it entails. But I still think he leaves something to be desired in terms of his decision making and his technique. But I do think that he's good when he has space, when he's able to run at defenders in one-on-one situations. I think that's where he can really thrive, and where he's shown probably his most promising qualities in these first 2 games, or this first game and a half that he's played in. The next one is not a question. It comes from Carlos Segovia. He says, Franco, it looks like Higuain's mother passed away. Rest in peace. Wouldn't be surprised if they don't play this weekend. We've touched on that. And again, I think we're both of the stance, you and I, Steve, that as of today, Monday, we just don't see them playing this weekend. Now, there is a question of if they travel outside the country to go to Argentina to be with their family, will they have to quarantine upon return? They've obviously gotten the first shots of the vaccination, but how will MLS deal with that? It's to be determined. We'll see what happens or how it unfolds. Next question comes from Joseph E. After hearing the sad news, it's safe to assume Iguan brothers won't be available this week. If they travel out of the country, when would they be allowed to play? Would they have to be quarantined? So I just answered that question, I guess, right before I read this one. So I think it's pretty straightforward there. Next one comes from Steve Munoz. What do you think about the accusation by Philly fans towards Miami fans about punching women and throwing beer? No evidence, just hearsay. I hadn't heard that. I had not heard that at all.
No.
So I can't really comment on that.
So it's possible to say anything, isn't it?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything. I haven't read anything. I haven't seen anything with regards to that. So, I mean, I don't have any thoughts about that. This is the first I've read about such a thing. Next question comes from Eric. How do you think Shawcross did, and do you see him getting more playing time? Steve, you can start here.
I thought you're going to say that I'm just bigging him up because he's English, but that's not true. I thought he came on and looked pretty solid. Remember, he hasn't played much football at all. I thought he came on. He did everything that was asked for him. He pushed Figal out wide, and then obviously that resulted in the cross. So he looked okay, and he's had probably 4 or 5 weeks now training. So look, it could be one option that he comes in, Figal pushes right, and then they could even push Leerdam further forward. I mean, it's a possibility, isn't it? After what we saw, but yeah, I mean, he looked okay.
I thought he looked solid, especially in the air, as you would expect someone of his height to be when he came in. But he only played 11 minutes, so I can't rave about his performance. I thought it was a solid debut, solid cameo from him. I do think it might have given Phil Neville something to think about in terms of when players get closer to full fitness, when Shawcross is closer to full fitness and gets into more of his rhythm. I do think maybe we could see Figal on that right back spot and Shawcross starting in the middle next to Leandro Gonzalez-Pires, but we'll see, because I think we'll still see Leerdam and Jovan Jones at those full-back spots for the foreseeable future. Next question, Steve, comes from Tweeter. That's just his name, Tweeter. Inter Miami got their first win of the season, 4 games fewer than last season. They also scored their first set-piece goal of the season when they struggled all last season. Now they had a comeback win against the CONCACAF Champions League team. How much credit would you give to Neville for the progress made so far?
It's early days, isn't it? He's only played 2 matches, proper matches, I guess. But as you mentioned before, he learned from his mistakes. He made the right call at the right time in terms of the substitutions on Saturday night, and they worked really well. And I think, the team responded pretty well from what was quite a disappointing defeat in the end, which would have hurt them because they were in the game against the Galaxy for long periods. So it's early days for everyone. Players, the staff, the front office, everything. But I think, it's progress. I just think wins like that, one on Saturday night, just helps, just changes the mood, and just, the week building up to the Nashville game, everyone will be on more of a high. Whereas if they would have lost, then we would have talked about, oh no, they're going to go 3-0, and now they're going to go to 5-0. So it's, I just think this just diffuses everyone, just lets everyone breathe a bit, and then you can enjoy the build up to what is going to be a big game.
Look, for me, I gave Neville credit for his substitutions this week, where I criticized him for his substitution decisions a week ago. So as for the team getting a result and a set-piece goal and those things, I think that is credit to Neville. Like, it's credit to the entire leadership that the team has now. A leadership that appears to be more in line with one another in terms of the vision for the squad. Whereas last year, and we don't need to revisit it at depth because we've talked about it ad nauseum, you had a sporting director who maybe hired a coach that didn't fit the philosophy he wanted or expected, and the players that were part of the squad necessarily didn't fit what the coach wanted or expected from the vision he saw for the team. So it just was one kind of jumbled, disjointed mess last year, whereas this year seems like everyone's kind of more on the same page, and I think that helps in terms of what a team is. So I think that's also that's Neville deserves some credit, but I think the entire leadership deserves some credit. But like Steve said, it's early days. Next question comes from Tank721. He asked, what will the starting lineup for this week be? We've touched on that, although I'm not sure if you gave me a left mid and a striker, assuming the Higuains are not around. I don't know if you gave me one. I could be wrong. I'm trying to think back. I don't think you did.
It's just too complicated, I think, to give a team right now. We have to wait and see. Too many imponderables.
I said Josh Penn and I said Julian Carranza.
He must like Chapman as well when he threw him on the weekend.
Yeah, but Jay Chapman's more of a center midfielder, and I don't think he did a good job playing there at left mid. I think he really struggled to find the game. I think he felt uncomfortable out there on the left because he's not a winger. But, I mean, it's definitely a possibility. Certainly a possibility from Phil Neville. Next question comes from Fighting Herons. The fullbacks have not been involved in the attack much so far. They rarely seem to get past the top of the 18-yard box. Would you like to see them more involved, or better to have them stay back for defensive cover? I'll start here, Steve, if that's okay. I would personally like to see them get more involved in the attack, like we saw from Nicolas Figal when he was moved to right back, and then he started delivering some service and some crosses, including one to Gonzalo Iguain that almost led to a third goal for Inter Miami. But I think we haven't seen that because I think they're limiting how often they make those runs because they're not at full fitness. That's just what I perceive. It's not information. It's just what I perceive from watching the games. And I would imagine that Phil Neville also doesn't want them going up and down nonstop, given that they're not at full fitness, because that can leave holes in the back if they don't have, the lungs to make the darting run back to cover space. So that's just what I think. That's just my analysis of what I've seen from them so far. How about you, Steve?
Yeah, I think you're right. Maybe they were coming into a pre-season as well, so they hadn't played too many games. They're fresh, aren't they? They've haven't been training with the team a number of weeks. So I think it's just getting the message across and then dealing with fitness and everything like that. So, but you don't want them flying too far forward because then they're going to get hit on the counter and they're not going to have enough energy to get back. So I can imagine him maybe just urging them maybe just to hold back a bit until they can sort of properly get up and down the pitch.
The questions keep raining in. As I'm speaking here, as I'm trying to, thinking that I'm wrapping it up, they just keep coming in. So the next one comes from Can't See Me, Jorge. Do you think we could see a starting lineup where Pizarro and Figal are moved to the outside and Federico and Shawcross are slotted into the middle? Based on the first two games, this could be a more dynamic starting 11. Let's assume he's not talking about this weekend. Let's assume he's talking about longer term, later in the year. Do you think we could see that? Because I definitely think we could see Shawcross in the middle, Figal on the right. And I definitely think we could see at some point Federico getting a start at the 10 because he is a 10 where Pizarro is not, and Pizarro being pushed out wide to the left. He's not a natural winger, of course, but I think we could see that just to try to maximize positions there from
absolutely. Definitely would have been boosted by how Figal a decent performance once he was pushed outside and onto the right hand side. I think that's the key, isn't it? Especially when in a league where you can't bring in rafts of players, all the time. You've got to try and deal with what you've got right now. So I definitely think Federico Higuain gives them an option. Aloha can play in central midfield. They've got Carranza as well, so they can sort of mix everything up. He definitely knows. I think everyone knows his sort of starting 11. It's just how can he just fit everything else in around it.
So it seems like we're going to get an answer out of you on this pod, Steve, because we have one final question from Eric. He says, okay, one last question. In the unfortunate but understandable event that the Higuain brothers are unable to play this weekend, who do you guys see starting at the 9th spot? Do you guys think they will sit Robbie Robinson out for this game? If so, who starts in his place? Thanks. So, Steve, I've already given my answers. Let's hear yours.
I mean, he hasn't got many options, has he, really? I mean, who else does he play out for? I mean, it has to be Carranza, I would have thought. That's the only option I can think of.
Yeah. What about at left mid if Robbie Robinson can't go?
Yeah, maybe Breck Shea then. Maybe Breck Shea or move one of the full-backs up. But that's what's on the other side, though. I guess Breck Shea, he never sort of lets you down, does he? But again, he hasn't really played too much either. He's been sick and hasn't really been training as much, I don't think, as the others. So it's difficult, isn't it? But if I had to go for one, I'd say him.
Steve, as you were saying that, right before you mentioned that, this thought came to me, and actually I think I'm actually more convinced that this is a real possibility. I think we could see Jovan Jones move from the left back spot into the left midfield spot because he has played there in the past. He just played there for his national team, Trinidad and Tobago, back in March. I think we could see him play there. Yeah. Inter Miami has talked about him being an option there in the past. They noted that he can play in the midfield during their announcement, their press release announcing his signing. So I think if fitness-wise he can hold up because he's been subbed out of the first two games, I think he could start at that left midfield spot. And Sami Guediri, who has been his replacement at left back when there's been substitutions from Phil Neville, I think Sami Guediri could get the start. The Boca Raton native, who played for Fort Lauderdale CF, I think we could see him at left back and Jovan Jones at left midfield if fitness from Jovan Jones is adequate enough that they could see him playing that position and giving you the two-way play that you need from that spot. That's just what I think now, and I actually definitely think we could see that. Okay, Steve, Oh, wait, sorry. Nope, not done yet. One last question. It snuck right in from Via. Where's Carranza? That's just his question. 2 words. Where's Carranza?
On the bench.
He has been. He's been on the bench. He hasn't played. I expect that we'll see him this weekend, regardless of whether Gonzalo Iguain is available or not. I think we'll see Julian Carranza in some capacity. That's just my gut feeling. I think, given what Nashville is in a matchup, more defensive-minded, I think we will see Julian Carranza at some point this weekend. Okay, Steve, that legit is it. There's no more questions.
Boom.
What are your final thoughts?
Yeah, look, a good win. I think, like we say, I think the pressure comes off them a bit for this week, building up to this game. It's not going to be easy. I think they're going to have memories of the beating they took in the playoff game, but different mindset, a few different players. Although we're going to be potentially missing some players, so I think it's going to be pretty much the same as Saturday. Not pretty on the eye, maybe to start with, but they can grind it out. They know they can. So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
My final thought. I think I've said everything I have to say about the team this week, but my final thought is, if you're a devout Miami Total Football Radio listener, if you are a hardcore Inter Miami fan, stay tuned to this podcast, stay tuned to our YouTube channel, and stay tuned to our Instagram account, because we are going to be doing a couple of giveaways in the next week or two, before the next home game for sure. So, I want to try to get these items into the hands of you guys, if that's at all possible, before the next home game. But we have one item that I think you guys will like, but one item that's pretty exclusive that I think you guys will really like. So if you're not following us on all 3 of those, follow us on all 3 of those. I haven't worked out how I'm going to do the giveaways, but yeah, just stay tuned, because I've already kind of teased it out on some of the social channels. But yeah, if you don't follow us on those channels, follow us, because we'll be doing that very, very soon. But that about does it for this week's show. We'll be back again next week, aiming for our regular Monday night time slot to record and dropping it on Tuesday morning. For Steve Brenner, I am Franco Panizo. We'll talk to you guys again